Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar with Precisely. Today, our conversation is about From Noise to Brilliance, Supercharge AI with Data Enrichment. I am your host, Francesca DeMeglio, and I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed guests, Ruslan Sultanov, Product Marketing Manager at Precisely, Tyler Dunn, Sales Engineer at Precisely, and Ivan Branco, Head of Information Management, BI, and Analytics at Volvo GTO SML. Before we launch into our conversation, we must do some housekeeping. We're delighted to have such a great audience, and we really want you to be a part of our conversation. You're welcome to use the live chat to get to know each other, share your LinkedIn so that you can network, and also connect with us, share stories, comments, and ask questions of our panelists. Right now, you can let us know from where you are joining. You may also use the Q&A button that's found at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar. And you can also check out the resources that we've made available to you. I know some of you are always looking for those slides. You can actually see today's slides and download them here by clicking on the resources button. And I'll be sharing some other resources with you right now in the chat. So keep an eye out for that. And without further ado, I will hand this over to you, Ruslan.
Thanks so much, Fran. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Super excited to be with all you today. My name is Ruslan Sultanov. I'm a product marketing manager at Precisely, and I'm joined by my colleague from solution engineering, Tyler Dunn, to provide an overview about the role of data enrichment in AI development, and also how existing data sets with additional context and relevant information can transform your AI models from noisemakers into brilliant problem solvers. We're also going to be joined by Ivan Branco from Volvo GTO for a panel discussion. So again, would like to encourage you all to ask your questions in the chat, and that way we can keep an engaging discussion later on. So for those of you unfamiliar with Precisely, we deliver software data and strategic services, and our mission is to deliver accuracy, consistency, and context to an organization's data, empowering them to make confident decisions. And knowing that trustworthy data is the cornerstone of any successful enterprise, we're dedicated to helping organizations globally to harness the power of their data. And as I'm sure you're aware, artificial intelligence, or AI, has transformed how we interact with technology, how we make decisions, and how we solve complex problems. And it's been at the heart of everything we've heard in the technology world this year, from chatbots that answer our questions to predictive analytics that shape our financial decisions. As a matter of fact, recent Vantage research has shown that 9 out of 10 leading companies indicated that they have investments in AI, which makes you consider all the factors that lead to successful AI initiatives. And one of those factors is trusted data. So we'll discuss the technical benefits of using trusted data here in a minute. But when it comes to AI initiatives, from the business perspectives, I think there are a few major success drivers that we want to address first. So one of those is pretty easy, is improving business outcomes. If you're using high quality data and high quality enrichment data, that will ensure that your AI decision making is based on reliable and trustworthy information. And that will ultimately lead you to faster and better business outcomes. Another one of those success factors is risk and compliance. So here we think about all the ways to prevent legal repercussions and reputational harm with high integrity data and data enrichment information, which you require to comply with data privacy laws, industry regulations, and ethical standards. Another one of those success drivers is user trust and credibility. And not only for the users of our applications, but we can think of it even for ourselves. If you notice that an AI-powered application is providing inaccurate results, then you're going to lose confidence in that application, and you may avoid using it altogether. And the last success factor I'd like to bring up here is simply cost savings, because untrustworthy data requires extra time and resources to identify and correct errors. And this ultimately leads to ineffective and inefficient AI programs. So if you're taking time to go back and clean up information that you've either trained or that you're introduced into the AI development pipeline after the fact, that will obviously cost you a lot more time, a lot more money to address. Anything I'm missing here, Tyler? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, everything you brought up is really great point. I think another really important part is, like you said, just having that full context to your data that you're, putting into your AI engine. So having that trusted data is super important, and getting that additional context with your responses also really helps kind of paint the full picture to any kind of query or question that's being asked to that AI engine. Otherwise, getting a simple yes or no response doesn't really give you a lot of context and a lot of trust in what you're getting back. Getting that additional information of you know uh, whether what's the walkability of a location, just getting yes, this location is walkable versus yes, here is why it's walkable, and getting that additional here are the ratings, here's what's nearby, things like that. I think that really helps you look at that response and say, okay, this is a good response. I like this engine. This is working for what my business needs.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely on point. I actually think it's a great segue. When we talk about data integrity, what we really mean is data that is accurate, consistent, and provides context. And context is sometimes what you really need in AI initiatives as well. So that means that we want to make sure that all members of our organizations can get the data that they need fast enough. They can understand that data and they can trust that information. But for the sake of this conversation, they need to have that location-based context to actually use in their applications and to use it in their AI development work. And you can think about the information around the address. Tyler mentioned walkability, but that can also be property features or demographics, any information that can be actually fed into the AI that's going to provide you some sort of decision. You want to consider all the factors of that particular problem and build a comprehensive view that's going to be helpful for your AI applications. And one of the most common and effective ways to do that exact thing that I just described, to add context to your data sets, is through the process of data enrichment. And that's basically a process of enhancing your current data. This could be proprietary data that you may already have internally, like customer lists or cold data records within telecommunications, or property features within an underwriting use case. And regardless, you want to be able to append relevant context from additional sources to improve overall value, accuracy, and usability of your data. Filling your data with context requires reference data sets, like we described, from trusted authoritative sources. So what we do is we work with organizations with diverse global needs that can only be met with some of those expertly curated data sets that contain thousands of various attributes within them. So those data sets, they fall into a few major categories, and we have here some of those presented on the slide. If you think about address and property data, this would be verified and validated addresses and properties that exist within the real world. So we know that those points are accurate, they're precise, and that they represent the most up-to-date property information associated with each of them. You have your boundaries, and you can think of those as administrative or community, state boundaries, or industry-specific boundaries. You also have demographics and consumer context data that helps us better understand people and their behavior. So for example, you can think of a consumer expenditure behavior that you can understand better with this type of data, which may be an important factor in your scenario, in your specific AI application. You also have points of interest category that can provide you some competitive intelligence by indicating where people work and play. Then there are streets that can help you navigate to get there, whether you're walking, driving, or biking. And then finally, data that falls into a risk category. So these would be things like natural hazard boundaries and things related to flood, fire, crime, earthquakes, coastal risks, for example, for those properties or addresses that may be up against the coast. And then ultimately, whether these risks are associated with property, boundary, or address. We can accomplish data enrichment in a few different ways, but using a unique and persistent ID is probably the easiest one. The best way to think about it is think about all the use cases where addresses change or property details relate to more than one address. That's really why addresses are not best candidates to join databases, let alone the fact that just missing address information can also lead to duplicates and many different issues along the way. So unique IDs makes data sets easier to join, and the details that you're retrieving will also always fall back to the address to help you avoid duplicates and other costly mistakes I've already mentioned. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Tyler now to share how data enrichment can be that secret sauce behind your AI models.
Yeah, thanks. So we'll kind of skim through a couple of these, but these are just some of the kind of general ideas of some of the very important factors that you have to address when you're dealing with building an actual AI engine. So things like model accuracy and performance. When you're working with a trained model, your responses are really limited to the data that model is trained on. So unless you're working with that model, right out of the box, and it's a day or two or a week after it's been trained, the data is already antiquated. So, can you really trust those results? And a lot of the models out there, they don't, they do give you some sense of when they were actually trained and what data they were trained on. But, if you're downloading this, in September and it hasn't been updated, or it was initially built in January, you're now looking at 9 months of antiquated information. So, at Precisely, the majority of our data sets are updated monthly. So you gain that additional confidence in the data that your model is being trained on, and you're going to be gaining, actual confidence in your responses and the answers that are coming back. Another one here is just really, reducing overfitting. That's another concept that can be handled with the enrichment. When AI responses are clear, concise, and accurate, your developers don't feel the need to implement larger models to help reduce the noise that's coming in from, something, maybe you're going from a 7B to a 14B model. You don't need that, because the enrichment is really taking care of that, getting rid of that additional noise. A couple bullets just to kind of reference the maintenance side of things. Maintenance is always a difficult thing with new technologies. When your models are trained, something like easier model maintenance. When your models are initially trained with trusted and enriched data, your updates are done, via automation, since you have that transparency and lineage to the data that you're getting from your vendor. So this really allows for less time updating and maintaining the data. And that rolls into, the reduced pre-processing overhead. When that data that's coming in is consistent and always follows kind of the same schema runs and everything that you're used to, you don't have to do any of that pre-processing on that data monthly or every quarter to make sure that it's going to be ingested correctly by your model. And then there's something just simple as the reliable model deployment. So when you're building your models on that trusted data, you're able to see a pattern in the responses that are being returned, and your models and engines are beginning to act more consistently as you're using your AI engine. And then lastly, this is kind of, the full circle of all of these things that come together. One of the most difficult things with AI right now is instilling trust with the responses that you're getting. So when you take everything I just mentioned with the trusted data enrichment, being used for the actual model training, reduction in noise because of better data quality, and the factor of maintenance on the models, and just the ability to kind of automate those that enrichment process, it really helps reduce the noise, and it helps build consistency in your responses, and it really helps kind of instill that trust in the the data that's being responded back from the AI engine. So again, real world challenges, there's plenty of them. I mean, these are just a couple examples of areas that we kind of specialize in. And, looking at financial services, so, fraud analytics, things like telecommunications, figuring out, where should my next network, be, where should we start laying fiber because there's a new development coming in, retail, where are more customers going, things like that. Those are all things that can be answered using AI. And two that I'm going to kind of talk to and show are the insurance industry, and the real estate industry. So just at a high level, for the insurance industry, you can really look at things like risk analysis. So, times where you ask something like, at this address, is it within a floodplain? And if you're only getting back, yes, this is it within a floodplain. Again, as I mentioned earlier in the slides, you don't have that full context of that property. So, it might be in a floodplain, but is it in the 100 year or is it in the 500 year? If it's in the 500 year, it's still an insurable property. But if it's in the 100 year, you might not want to take that risk. So that you can use things like this to help figure out premiums for insurance. The other one is real estate. So things like site selection or even lifestyle modeling. So those are really important in terms of understanding, whether, what's the neighborhood like at this location? How do we figure out what the crime is like? What's the school data? So how do we bring those factors all together to really get an understanding of the actual property? And from that, you're able to build better property valuations because you have that additional context and you have the full picture of what that property looks like. So I kind of have two examples here. We'll start initially with kind of that AI engine. So we're going to go into the mindset of a person who's looking to rent a house in, maybe we'll say San Francisco. So maybe I am coming from somewhere like New York City, where I've lived for years, I don't own a car, and I want to understand, hey, I see 19 Geary Boulevard is up for rent or for purchase. Do I need to buy a car? Is this something that it makes sense for my lifestyle? So, you can put something like this into an AI engine, and without context, without that enrichment, it can come back and just say, yes, this is a walkable neighborhood. But the reality is that that's not going to give you a full understanding of, what is actually around that location. When we've done this with enriched data and asked that same question, you're getting back an overall walkability of 4.8 out of 5. You're getting a walking to amenities rating, so 4.8 out of 5. So that's things like, walking to a grocery store, walking to a coffee shop, which is really important if you don't have a vehicle. And then things like leisurely walking. So that's something like, going to a park. Is there a nearby park or things like those nearby that can really enable, that person to understand, okay, with the full context, yes, now I understand why 19 Geary Boulevard is a walkable neighborhood, and I can understand what is actually nearby due to those responses from that enriched data. And I'm going to kind of hop into sharing my screen real quick, and I'm going to show kind of the other way of, Rosalind, if you want to stop sharing, I can hop over with mine. And I'm just going to show you kind of the other way that, some of the data that's also sitting on the back end of this. So here's just kind of a screen showing, some of our information that we have coming from Precisely. So just to kind of talk to that property risk profile. So same thing, this is in Houston, and we're just going to kind of look at some of these risks. So, things like just a high level overview. We've got earthquake, flood, wildfire, and this is kind of giving you that initial, what is the risk at that location? So this would be really useful for somebody in the insurance world, understanding those premiums. We've got earthquake, flood, wildfire, property fire, but then we can also kind of dig into these a little bit more and understand, just additional information. So here we have that Precisely ID that Rosalind mentioned. And that's that unique and persistent identifier that's associated with every address in the country. So, distance to the nearest fault at this location is 373 miles. That is probably not an issue. But as we start to kind of look through some of these, we see there's a high property fire risk. So let's see, here we've got the nearest fire station ID. The drive time is about 8 minutes. So the second nearest fire station is about 13 minutes away. So there you're starting to understand, if there is a house fire at this location, it's going to take some time for the local firefighters to get to that location. And that just builds that additional context, around this property location. So maybe the insurance premium on this location is going to be a little bit higher because we now have the additional context for this location. And the other one I'm going to show just kind of speaks back to that lifestyle, kind of the real estate example that I was giving. So here we're in Fort Lauderdale. So here we can kind of look at some property information. We can see property value, we can see lot size, we get some neighborhood information, and these are all different layers. But kind of, again, if we go back to what do we really want to see, if I'm moving to this area, I want to understand, what are the schools like? What are the rankings? We can just ask, an AI engine about something like this and say, are the schools good at 101 Northeast 11th Ave in Fort Lauderdale, Florida? And it might come back and say, looking at these ranks, where we're talking maybe, yeah, they're medium, they're middle of the road schools. But when you start to dig in, you see, actually the Sunrise Middle School, it's in the top 0.25% of the rankings for this area. And, Fort Lauderdale, it's up in the top, 10%, top 20% for school state rankings within, Florida. We've got public safety. So this is some of that crime statistics. And you might say, again, you might ask, is this location, is it safe? And it'll come back and say, it's not safe, but you don't really have that additional context of property crime, auto theft, robbery, are all the highest within Florida. These are the highest rankings. So that might not be something that if you have kids or if you have a lot of vehicles and you're worried about, things happening to your antique car collection, this might not be the area that you really want to focus on in terms of moving to that location. Back to you, Ruslan.
Yeah, I'll share. I think I'll need you to stop sharing so I can share. I didn't realize it when I was passing it.
Okay.
I was passing it to you. All good. I really have just a quick wrap up here. Thank you, Tyler. Just wanted to summarize. These are some common ways that we use data enrichment and the data itself to bring additional value to AI and ML and advanced analytics models that you may be developing within your organizations. So if you had to come away from this conversation with just a few takeaways, I wanted to just provide these three. So first, data enrichment is all about appending context to your data from additional sources. It improves accuracy and performance of your AI-powered applications, and that in turn helps you stand out and build applications that deliver better business outcomes and also build user trust. And with that, I'm really excited to dive into the panel. I'm excited to hear about all the applications of data enrichment that perk the interest of our audience, and also just join my colleagues here to have a conversation. I'm going to stop sharing just so we can all see each other.
Yeah, this way we can start the conversation. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm really excited, audience, to hear what your big concerns are. We can talk about the results. I'll turn it over to you in a minute, Ruslan. Let me just tell everyone what we found. So when we asked you what are the biggest concerns that your organization has when it comes to implementing AI, 50% said the quality of the data. There was a tie for second place with stale data and unproven technology at 25%. And basically no one had to worry about lack of enrichment options, but I'm sure that could be a concern for some who didn't participate in this poll. So tell me a little bit about what your thoughts are, Ruslan.
I would just say that the lack of quality of data, that kind of indicates that a lot of the times when we think about data quality, we may think of maybe it's not complete or it's not consistent. So the lack of enrichment kind of drops from the charts because that's not even considered to be a part of data quality. But some may argue that if you don't have the data feels required for you to implement AI technology or any use case, it doesn't have to be related to AI. But basically, if your data doesn't provide the context that you need from your data, that data is lacking quality as well. So it's interesting, it's tricky when you look at the enrichment as a standalone feature. you might not necessarily focus on that. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of business potential that data enrichment can unlock and contribute to the quality of your data. I wasn't sure, Tyler or Yvonne, if you had any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I think hopefully we've kind of been able to talk through a little bit of the importance of data quality and how here precisely we handle that. And I think it's important because, you know, if you can't trust the data that's coming in and you're concerned about the actual quality coming in, then nothing that you're getting back, no responses, no queries are really going to be anything that you'll want to, you know, present to anybody, because you can't stand behind, you can't stake your reputation behind what is coming back from there. So, you know, the data quality, it's something at Precisely, you know, we strive to, you know, make sure is ironed out. And that's kind of the beauty of Precisely's data, is that it's, you know, we have metadata, we have data lineage, we have this, we're very transparent with what we have to help our end users understand, you know, why is this trusted data? Why is this important data? And, you know, that helps bring confidence to any kind of anything and any way that you're utilizing that data.
Even, did you want to add about the reaction to the poll results, and then maybe tell us a little bit about the AI journey that Volvo has taken on with you?
Absolutely. I'm Ivan Branco. I'm heading information management, BI and analytics for Volvo Group Trucks operations for our logistics division. And I found it very interesting, some of the answers, some a little bit surprising even, I would say. The answer regarding unproven technology shows that there are a bit of misconceptions regarding artificial intelligence, because it's not something new. We are hearing more and more about it because of generative AI, but it's been in the industry for many decades, and it has been used successfully in many different ways. And I think what Ruslan and Tyler have shown to us today, again, not necessarily new, but it definitely something that needs to take place if you want to create very good insights out of the information that you're making available. And it's the old statement, garbage in, garbage out. So if your data quality is not there, then like Tyler was just saying, you will not be able to make anything out of it. So when it comes to Volvo and to my responsibilities, what we have been building is a foundation. And within that foundation, one of our core objectives or one of our core focus areas is data quality. Because of what I just stated, we need to make sure that, let's say, when it comes to the usage of the information, that we're able to generate value. In order to do that, the information, the data has to be correct. And we're using this in many different ways. We're using this to generate smart business applications. We're doing this for the analytics side, for creating insights. And we are exploring as well AI, and we have in the past as well. So we have a lot of solutions based on machine learning, and we're currently exploring as well generative AI, because that's the trend. And of course, data enrichment is a layer that is necessary for you to take your data one step further. As Ruslan and Tyler explained, it's about giving it a context, and that context is based on the use cases that you will have created, on what the business value that you want to have generated is really looking for. So it has to be part of the strategy, the data strategy of any organization, to look into how you will perform this. And here, of course, we're looking only at one dimension, which is data enrichment, but this is part of a bigger strategy or vision that any company needs to have. So be it from the moment you do the data ingestion, or that you're combining or consolidating data to generate data products, it is at that moment that you can already, if you wish to do so, let's say, enrich your data so that your data product is really fulfilling the process or capability that you want to have in place. So that's what we have been doing. It's really in creating these data products where we have core data products, and then we have, let's say, these more customized data products. It's really about, okay, which additional data do we need to add in order to be able to create new opportunities for the business? And it can be an insight coming, let's say, from the data organization, or it can be an insight coming from the business itself, because no one knows better than the business what they want to see and how they want to see it, or the context to which that data needs to be related. So I think it's very important that the audience today takes away that this is a very collaborative approach, and that companies such as Ruslan's and Tyler's are really assisting in leveraging or let's say or bridging in between business and IT. It's not one without the other. It's together that you can get there. And that's what we've been doing also with our own internal IT force.
Yeah, and Ruslan, did you want to add something? I saw that you looked like you wanted to add something.
I was just agreeing with everything that
Okay,
Yvonne
good.
was saying. And also, I mean, I'm in product marketing, so I'm kind of at that intersection of business and tech. And so for me, I can totally relate to that. And honestly, that's in a lot of ways I look at data enrichment and in my field of work is in how can we help business users across the organization use data better. That's honestly one of the things that I feel very passionate about. So that's why I was just nodding because that
That's
was making
good.
a lot of sense
Well,
to me.
it does lead us to my next question for Evan. What are the areas you see where data enrichment could play a role, or how are you using it?
It's a tough question because the analysis is more in which areas does it not add value. I mean, it has to be purpose driven, of course. So let's say in our role, we're very much responsible for the foundation. Like I mentioned, creating the platform, having the data ingested, having the data consolidated and modeled according to common models, but then also receiving, let's say, this business logic that in itself can be seen as, let's say, an enrichment of the information, but also combining with external data sources so that it can generate more value. So when we are doing this analysis, for example, we have planning solutions, we have transport solutions, where I think you gave a few examples regarding taking, let's say, geographical data or geographical information to be able to optimize what you're already receiving from your core applications. We also use it for capacity planning when it comes to our operative force, where you're really matching, let's say, the number of people that can deliver on the task that you have. So there's different dimensions. So for me, it's a sea of opportunities where you should not limit yourself. You should think outside of the box as well. And again, I go back to how can the business add value? Because I mean, I'm in IT. There's a lot of people here probably in IT as well. We can never assume that we know the answer. The business people know the answer. They know what the data means and they know how the data needs to be used. And it is bridging this collaborative development where you're working as one team that you can make sure that you can deliver towards the objectives of your respective companies. So I think that should be the focus. But the opportunities, you will not miss any opportunities, that's for sure.
Sure. Did anyone else want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's kind of the important part, is understanding that this isn't just we're not just talking about a single company's data. We're talking about working together to fix holes within other people's data. So we work with plenty of companies where they come to us with their own large data sets, and it's a merging of the two, and we have constant feedback loops that like Yvonne said, there's the people in the field, the people who are subject matter experts are the customer, and they know everything. They know their data better than we do, and so it's important to have that feedback loop with data enrichment and with customers to also take into account what they're working with, because at the end of the day, they're the SMEs. They know what they need to accomplish, and we're just here to kind of help add additional context to their data and try to help relieve some of their pain points.
Right. I think that's so important. Customer is always right, even in these different situations. So let's move on to a little bit more deeper conversation about enrichment. Why is quality enrichment data often considered a linchpin of successful AI projects? Can you share a little bit about the link and maybe some examples of how poor quality enrichment data has derailed AI and how we can overcome those challenges?
Yeah, and I can jump in first. I mean, I think the easiest one to answer to are the poor data that's coming back from AI engines. There's plenty of talk about hallucinations from AI models, where you ask it, what's today's date, and it gives you, some date down the road or some date in the past, and right then and there, no one cares anymore. At that point, you basically have no faith in anything that's coming back from that engine, and I think that's that's kind of the importance of, having trusted data and having that trusted information behind your model. Things like a RAG model, where it's retrieval augmented generation, where you're able to just point and say, don't comb the internet for my answer. That's not what I'm looking for. My business knows my data the best. Look specifically at this S3 bucket, or this folder, or these documents that I'm embedding into this model. Look specifically here for your information that you're going to give me back. And that way, those simple questions such as what's today's date, it's able to do that just because it's a general natural language chat bot. But when you add something more in depth, like how many units are there in this apartment building, it's able to go into that specific data set that you fed it, and it's only going to return information from that data, rather than publicly sourced information, and it might give you the wrong amount. But when you're pointing it at trusted data with context, that's when you're going to get those correct responses, and that's when you're going to avoid those hallucinations that really, we hear all of the bad. That's pretty much what we hear is the bad. How things don't work is what we hear, but the reality is, as Yvonne said, there's plenty of examples of this stuff working great. And when you set it up correctly, pointing at trusted information, that's when you're going to get good responses.
Yeah, I think that's such an important fact that people don't realize. Like you guys have mentioned, generative AI has put it into the mainstream conversation, but I can assure you 20 years ago as a reporter, I was talking to MIT professors about AI. It was already being used, and maybe even before that. So we have to realize that there are many more positives than the negative stories when it is done with thought and care, and people pay attention to the ethics and privacy and all the other things that go along with any technology. So did anyone else want to add to that response before we move on?
I just not so much to add, just look at a quite different angle. I agree with everything Tyler said. I'm also thinking about, when I think about this question about why it makes sense to use data enrichment, I always think about efficiency. And that's honestly why a lot of people started using LLMs like in their personal life. Instead of going to Google and searching for something, you can just put it in Gemini or ChatGPT. And it's the same way for a business. There's one use case that always comes to mind is when telecommunications are looking for serviceable locations. So if you look at the addresses, the address data as it is doesn't provide that context into what location can be considered serviceable, whether you can provide services there. So adding data enrichment to that particular use case can unlock millions in potential revenue that wasn't available to you just because you didn't see that. So that's where the efficiency part comes in, because to source that information and to create that data set on your own, that would take you a whole lot of more time and a lot of more resources. So it's usually the examples of where you can find efficiencies that I think can provide value to AI with data enrichment.
And this is the PEX network community where efficiency is king. That's why people come to us. So that's a great point to make. So one of the most common AI bottlenecks is domain knowledge integration. How do you normally deal with this issue, and can data enrichment help? Any of you want to start? Ruslan and Tyler.
Go for it, Yvonne.
I've been talking for a while, yeah.
But can you repeat the question again, friend?
Sure. One of the most common AI bottlenecks is domain knowledge integration. How do you normally deal with this issue, and do you think data enrichment can help?
Again, when we talk about AI, it's a very broad term. There's a lot of different technologies within. Yeah, let's say if we would focus then on generative AI and the large language models approach, then for sure, I mean, your data has to be correct.
Right. It learns from you.
People think that there's some kind of brain behind the scenes just giving the answers. No, they're corresponding to data models that we have created, and they're describing it according to the input that they receive. So if the data is not good, your answer is not going to be good either. People have to really realize that. So the bottleneck, the main one is data quality. And it is also for us with information modeling, which is to create relationship between the different data attributes so that they can make sense. So we're talking even before you do the enrichment, where enrichment can be, let's say, something coming on top of this. So
Yeah.
for us, it's mainly that, making sure your data quality is of the highest that you can have, and then secure that when you're doing your information modeling, that you have the necessary workforce to do it, because people underestimate this task. Information modeling, so taking data that is in tables, that is according to a specific structure, it's not making sense to everyone in the world. And even an ITer, if you take a data engineer, if you give him a table, he understands the structure, he does not understand the data. So to put that into context, he needs to have that collaborative approach that we discussed before, and that takes time. People need to dedicate time to build that. So solve your data quality issues, set your data models, and for me, you're then set to go.
Right. I think that's a great point about how, first of all, whatever we put in is what you're going to get out of it too. That's true of all the technology that's around right now. We still need people to use the technology and use it effectively. And then the other thing that you point out is that we have to act as translators. Those of you have to act as translators. Those of you who know data, so that it makes sense and that it can be used and leveraged appropriately. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's also, sometimes you can also look at something like this and say, you know what, maybe we don't need to all be SMEs in our entire, data catalog. And that might be okay, because when you have, trusted information coming in, or, again, the garbage in, garbage out, when you know the data that's going into an AI engine or an LLM is trusted and it's good data with context, you don't need to know, Precisely has over 10,000 data products. We don't know all of them, but we know, that there's great data there. We know it's trusted. We know it's been run. We have, lineage. We have metadata that goes along with it. So it's something where, you might know a small amount of your business processes, but when you start to expand that because you're ingesting good information, then you can kind of start to let go. It's almost like delegating the trust and saying, listen, I know the data that's coming in is good. I don't know, I couldn't speak to a presentation on it, but I know that the data that's coming in is good. And, I'm going to let that run and kind of have trust in those answers, because I've worked with this information and it's good up to this point.
That's a great point. I wanted to recognize that Wendy on our live chat is asking us a question. And Wendy, maybe if we misinterpret it, you can rephrase the question again. But she's asking about data quality using AI, I believe leveraging AI, how it can be a useful tool for human assets recognition. I think this is maybe when it comes to talent and HR. Certainly it's used often in those areas. I don't know if any of you have some response to that or anything you'd like to share with Wendy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of different avenues that you can go with AI engines. And I think that's definitely, people are starting to realize that there are internal tools, external tools, client facing, however you want to look at it. AI can really help drive some of those things, and things like, in an HR sense of, an engine, you can definitely, something like RAG, where a retrieval augmented generation engine, where you have all of your HR policies, you have all of those things in a certain area, and you're pointing an engine directly at that and saying, someone's asking about whether or not they can work from Costa Rica, instead of combing through hundreds of pages of documents to try to find that specific thing, you can just ask that natural language model that, are we allowing employees to work from Costa Rica? And you can get that information back from your specific HR policies. And, and even things like, whether you're looking at a whole host of resumes of somebody applying for an internship, you could put them all into a single repository and say, give me, maybe you've got 100 applications, give me all of the applicants who have JavaScript or have, Microsoft Excel experience, and it'll give you back those names. And then you can really start to narrow down your search and say, okay, from those, who lives within a 10-mile radius of one of our facilities. And, you can start to kind of dig into things like that. And these engines are able to handle complex queries like that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Just working with human resources professionals for some time now, the most widely way they use AI is for that very task of combing through those many CVs and resumes, and finding the data. Of course, you have to be responsible. And Wendy, if I'm understanding correctly, and you're talking about recognition to grow, there are many ways that people are leveraging AI now in HR, and across companies to recognize their talent, recognize when someone is ready for a promotion, needs extra training. And again, I would imagine data enrichment could help that as well, so that you could, make the best decisions for individuals on your payroll. So moving on from that, did anyone else want to share about our previous conversation? Otherwise, I would like to bring up the fact that we want to talk about enriching data and whether it's possible to enrich data at scale. We're running into situations where we need fresh information, and it sounds like data enrichment could be a good fit. And how do you tell? What are some tips and advice you have for people?
I can start and then let my panelists, fellow panelists contribute too. Just the one thing I've noticed recently, I've seen to solve that issue of enriching your data at scale, I've seen people delivering data via APIs. And that's something that's starting to emerge. It's not, again, like with AI, not something that didn't exist, but something that's picking up right now to deliver data insights directly into your applications, so that you don't have to manage data necessarily. I'm not sure if that's super relevant to this conversation per se, but that's one of the ways you can deliver data enrichment at scale.
Yeah, that's a good point, I think. Did anyone else want to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Ivan.
I was just going to say I agree with let's say what Ruslan has stated. So I mean, there's a panoply of different things, different approaches that we can use AI for. We can actually use AI to solve the issues that will allow us to use AI as well. So for sure, and all of that should be considered, but should be considered within a specific vision. And I often challenge companies to think, or even when I'm doing conferences, I'm challenging the attendees to tell me, does your company have a vision? Does it have a strategy? Because none of this makes sense if you don't have a master plan. So first you have to have your master plan. What do you want to do with the data? And then you should see AI as a means to achieve your objective, not as an objective in itself. So I think that's important. And if you think like that, then it can be a tool that you can use to assist you in giving the different steps up to the moment that you reach your target. So it's more in that sense that I wanted to comment.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Long-term thinking. A lot of times we throw these new technologies or data or the idea of automation at the wall and just think it's going to solve all our problems without thinking about how it fits into our strategy, our culture, what it's going to do for us long-term versus short-term. And I think we sometimes are short-sighted as humans. So that's a very good reminder. Did anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, and kind of along that same line is, utilizing what new technology and what emerging technologies are out there. So, I know my colleague mentioned, APIs. Another big one is, using things like, Databricks or large kind of serverless opportunities to just really, a company might say, well, we have millions and millions and maybe even billions of records. There's no way we can enrich all of that. And the answer is, yeah, you can, but 100%. There's no limitation when it comes to things like that. There's plenty of technologies now that help you do full enrichment at full scale And you're able to get a lot of context and a lot of information back from things like that enrichment.
Mhm. I think those are very good points as well. So in the context of using third-party data for enrichment, which is what we're talking about today, what are the key ethical considerations that organizations need to address? I've mentioned a couple now about privacy, and we talked about the quality of the data. We talked about HR, which brings up bias. If you're spitting bias into the AI that's scanning your resumes, you're going to get bias back. So how can we ensure integrating external data sources maintains transparency, fairness, and privacy?
Bias is one thing you mentioned that's a big one, I think, in AI that we can all appreciate. Another one I would say is you want to make sure that the data you're enriching your AI applications with is stripped of all PII data. I wouldn't want I wouldn't want AI know like my personal address or things like that.
Right.
And that's something that you can run into. I think a lot of the times, a lot of mistrust that is a common misconception too, that people run into when using AI is that fear of your personal information getting exposed. So that's why it's sure that enterprises and small, large governments take that into consideration.
Yeah. We had someone recently, a PEX professional, who brought up the fact, and you mentioned this as an example earlier, that they use it with their sales team to provide, product information for their pharmaceuticals in the moment while they're, in meetings with doctors and things like that. And they're fearful that it could get out. To competitors, the very specific information about how their products are created and things like that. So I do think there is a little bit of that fear there. And it requires some careful consideration. Tyler, it looks like do you have something to add maybe, or are you just nodding along?
Just nodding. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, again, the beauty with, how you build your AI engine is you can keep things all internal, completely, not communicating with the internet. And,
Right.
and then you've got an internal tool. And then you can also have external facing tools where something like that, you would want all information scrubbed out. But the reality is it's kind of how you decide to build things like this. And I think
Right.
that's really important. And, understanding which direction your information is going really, it really helps understand kind of your final product.
Yeah, I think we also have to educate people on those firewalls, because I think some people think, oh, if I put it out there, eventually it's going to get out into the world. Even what are your concerns about the ethical considerations when you're using this technology?
Well, I don't have that many concerns because if things are done correctly, if you have a proper data governance structure in place, a
Yes.
framework that is working, and also considering like I'm based out of Europe and we have very strict regulation when it comes to data privacy.
Hmm.
If you have that correctly done, then of course, when you're cataloging your data, you will have the classification of the information. And when you're creating new data sets, new data products out of that same information, you will also classify those. And then your access management framework will be adjusted to the classification that you have done. So if you have that data governance structure in place, that should work, and you should not have many concerns because you will be securing that only the right people have access to the right data. But again, it goes back to this discussion on vision and strategy. If
Right.
everything is anchored within, let's say a single framework structure that is delivering that strategy, then you should not have these concerns because you have already foreseen that eventuality. So.
Yeah, this came up at our process mining event last week as well, where one of our panelists reminded everyone, again, if you're putting out, bad processes, you're automating things in a way that's not going to function properly or is going to hurt the people who are working for you, it's going to have bad implications. You have to be thoughtful and pay attention to what you're doing from the start and really think strategically. We have another question from Wendy here, and then we'll probably have to do final comments and close up because we're running out of time. But Wendy is asking about the future generative languages. I think what she's trying to say is, how can AI be used to eliminate errors that occur in the workplace? This is something that process excellence professionals are always looking at and considering. I believe that data enrichment would help with that too. Can you guys explain it to us?
I would just say, just from the get-go, I mean, one of the ways you can do, like, some of the, if we're talking about some of the tasks where errors can occur, that's the process automation using AI is a place where you can address those. Obviously, with data enrichment, maybe data enrichment can help eliminate some of those biases that you can consider while making those decisions. And I see, Tyler, you want to add something? Oh.
Yeah, and kind of speaking to, one of, whether, we'll hop in a persona of an insurance professional. If there was a very interesting case that we talked to the company about, where there was a specific property that was in a fire zone. Basically it was in California, it would always burn. But the interesting thing, when you looked at the actual fire patterns, this one house, it was a large property. The reality is they hadn't actually had a fire in years, in tens of years. So everything around them was burning. This property was on the correct aspect of the mountain. It was at the right elevation. It was near enough water where it never actually burned. So if you're an insurance professional and you have bad data and you don't have that enrichment, and you ask something like, should we insure this property at 123 Main Street? And it comes back and just with a blanket statement says, no, it's in a fire zone. You're not going to insure it. But it was a very large property. The premiums were, it was a good premium. If you have that additional context with granularity, then you're going to get a response back that says, actually, yeah, we should. This property, they probably have not, they've probably tried to get insurance from many companies and they're saying no, but we're actually looking at this, and because of our enrichment, we can see that, yeah, we should, because it's going to be all right. We can insure this without putting ourselves at a lot of risk.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably the house you want to live in California right now. It keeps burning.
Yep.
Oh, goodness. Poor California. So with that, we are running out of time. Do you all have, maybe we can go through each of you, your final thoughts or takeaways you'd like to leave with the audience?
Yeah, I can start because I'm still unmuted. But yeah, I think hopefully everyone's kind of seen how when you have good quality data coming in, coming out with any kind of lineage where you're understanding, this is a trusted source. This is the information I'm getting in is good. So what's coming out is good. It really helps build that trust in your responses, and then adding that geo enrichment, or regular enrichment with those answers just really helps paint that full picture of whatever question you're asking to that engine.
Yeah. Ruslan, did you want to share?
Sure. No, absolutely. What Tyler said, and I really enjoyed our discussion too. I think it was really valuable. Thank you for all the folks in the chat for asking the questions, and thanks for Yvonne, Tyler, and you, Fran. It was fun. Thank you.
Oh yeah,
Thanks for having
very
me.
fun. And Yvonne, did you want to add anything before we say our goodbyes?
No, just that it has been a pleasure to be able to contribute, and that I think everyone sees that data has become more and more important, and that AI is then supporting that and then allowing us to deliver in an optimized way. So we should not be afraid. We should participate of this journey. And then we have great companies such as the one of Ruslan and Tyler to support us with that.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. We have to embrace technology and embrace the future, not be afraid of it. And if we do that, we can lead the way instead of, you know, being told or having to be fearful about it. With that, I'd like to thank Tyler, Ruslan, and Ivan, and all of you audience members. Thank you, Wendy, and everyone else who asked questions and shared their where they're joining from and what they're doing. I hope all of you will join us again tomorrow and the next day for what I'm calling Pexapalooza Week. We have a number of webinars coming forward to you. And you can also join us in April for our low-code automation webinar series. And there are going to be more conversations like this. We hope to see you then. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.